Namaskar, Indira Gandhi, the first phase, January 1966 to March 1977. After the sudden and unexpected death of Lal Bahadur Shastri in January 1966, once again Gujari Lal Nanda was appointed the interim prime minister pending elections. Morarji Desai was a contender for the post of the Congress party parliamentary leader and as a corollary the Prime Minister. The syndicate supported Indira Gandhi, Nehru's daughter, and most party members also were in favor of her. She won the election. It is said most of the senior congressmen supported her as they thought she was weak enough to be manipulated by as they wanted. Time was to prove them wrong. Early life. Indira Priyadarshini was born in November 1917 in Allahabad to Jawaharlal Nehru and Kamala Nehru. Indira, India was in the sorry, India was in the midst of a struggle for freedom from British, and the, the Nehru family was fully involved in the struggle. So almost from childhood, Indira was closely in touch with the events of those days of turmoil. It is reported that when bonfires of foreign goods were made during the freedom movement, Indira, then a child, gave up a doll made in England to be thrown into the fire at the age of 12. She brought together and lead a group of children, calling it the Venard Sena to do their bit for the freedom struggle. These youngsters addressed envelopes, made flags, helped put up notices, and carried messages to the freedom fighters. Indira attended several schools and colleges, sometimes just for brief periods. These included the École de Bex in Switzerland, Rabindranath Tagore's Vishwabharati University at Santiniketan, Bengal, and Somerville College, Oxford, UK, among others. In 1936, Indira joined the Indian National Congress. In in 1936, Indira joined the Indian National Congress, and in 1938 she became a member of the Indian League. It was during her stay in England that she met Roji Jahangir Gandhi, later changed to Gandhi, who was also a member of the Indian League and India League and studying in London. Firoze was a Persian. In, Indira returned to India in 1941 with Firoz Gandhi and she married him in 1942. Firoz too was a member of the Indian National Congress and took part in the freedom struggle. Indira was an active participant in the Quiet India movement and was imprisoned in Naini Central Jail for some time. Firoz and Indira had two sons, Rajiv and Sanjay, both of whom were later to be the part of India's political scene in their different ways. Political journey after independence, when the Congress party came to power and Jawaharlal Nehru became the country's prime minister, Indira often acted as her father's hostess for events and accompanied him on his travels. In the 1951 to 1952 general elections, Indira Gandhi handled the campaigns of Firoz, who was contesting from Raebareli in Uttar Pradesh. Firoz was elected to the Lok Sabha, but they had differences in personal life and soon separated. Firoz soon became a major spokesman against the corruption in the government. He was instrumental in exposing a scam involving major insurance companies and the finance minister in Nehru's cabinet, T.T. Krishnamachari. He died in September 1960. Indira joined the Congress Party's working committee in 1955, and in 1959 she was elected the party's president. Following the death of her father in 1964, she became a member of the Rajya Sabha and was inducted into the cabinet by Lal Bahadur Shastri at the Information and She was a member of the Rajya Sabha and was inducted into the cabinet by Lal Bahadur Shastri as the Information and Broadcasting Minister. Prime Minister on January 19, 1966, Indira Gandhi became the third Prime Minister of India, the first woman to occupy the post in the country. The general elections of 1967 came amidst economic problems, stagnation, and food crisis. rising prices, unemployment, which caused much disenchantment among the people. The decision on devaluation of the rupee was criticized by many. Also, political disputes obstructed the import of wheat from the US. In the 1967 general elections, Indira Gandhi won the Lok Sabha seat from the Raebareli. The Congress party managed to win the elections, but managed only a thin majority in the Lok Sabha. Indira Gandhi was now Prime Minister, but also had Morarji Desai as Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. The Congress either lost power or failed to get a majority in several states. In the assembly elections, the coalition governments that took power in many states, however, led to unstable governments and the practice of defections from party to party. Congress split and minority government at the center. In the following years, there was much turmoil within the Congress party. So far, the Congress party had been accommodative of diverse interests. There was now a growing divide in ideology between the right and the left. The Congress right was in favor of tackling the protest movements and putting down the left, giving more space to the private sector in the economy and improving election relations with the US. Indira Gandhi did not agree with many of the ideas of the senior leaders of the party. She was in favor of the radical economic reform, which did not meet the approval of the conservative senior lead members of the party. A 10-point program adopted by the Congress Working Committee under Indira Gandhi's age refers to the need for social control of banks, the government taking up foreign trade, nationalization of general insurance, ceilings on property, public distribution of food grains, accelerated implementation of land reforms, provision of subsidized plots for housing the rural poor. It is Indira Gandhi was in favor of abolishing the privy passages to former rulers of the princely estates. Her decision to nationalize a set of banks without consulting her finance minister was not approved by the senior party members. In the end, Morarji Desai was forced to resign from the cabinet with the death of President Zakir Hussain in May 1969, which things came to a head. There were strong differences over the choice of candidates for the election to the post of President of India. The official Congress candidate was Neelam Sanjeeva Reddy, a member of the syndicate, but Indira Gandhi, now increasingly leaning towards socialistic ideology and fearing that the syndicate would use Rajiv Reddy to get her out of power, was in favor of V.V. Giri, erstwhile Vice President, now standing as an independent candidate. Sorry, the official Congress candidate was Neelam Sanjeeva Reddy, a member of the syndicate, but Indira Gandhi, now increasingly leaning towards socialist ideology and fearing that the syndicate would use Sanjeeva Reddy to get her out of power, was in favor of V.V. Giri, while Vice President, now standing as an independent candidate. V.V. Giri won the election and became the President of India in August 1969. Consequently, consequently, in November, the Congress Party President S. Nijalingappa expelled Indira Gandhi from the party on the ground of indiscipline. India Gandhi managed to win. Indira Gandhi managed to win over a majority of party members to sorry. In, Indira Gandhi managed to win over a majority of the party members to her side and created her own faction, the Congress R, where R stood for Equidistanists in 1969, while the other group was Congress O with O for organization headed by Ram Subhag Singh. Indira Gandhi no longer had a majority in the Lok Sabha, but with the issue-based support of regional parties such as the DMK and the Akali Dal and the two communist parties, she retained power at the center. In the 1971 elections, triumphant, found Indira Gandhi found she could not take independent action as a head of a minority government. Her efforts at progressive legislations were obstructed by the Supreme Court as well as the Parliament. She got the nationalization of banks through a presidential ordinance after clearing the legal lacune pointed out by the court. The abolition of privy purses not only failed to get passed in Parliament, The constitutional amendment fell through just by one vote in the Rajya Sabha, but the presidential order de-recognizing the princess that Indira Gandhi brought in was nullified by the Supreme Court in December 1970. Indira Gandhi recommended a dissolution of the Lok Sabha and called for early elections. The nation thus went to the polls in 1971. The catchy slogan of the Congress was "Garebi Hatao, remove poverty." Indira Gandhi campaigned for social change and removal of disparities in income and for stability of government. The non-communist opposition party Swatantra Congress or SSP came together in what was called the Grand Alliance with the election cry of in the Indira Hatao, remove Indira. Congress are won the election with a good majority, probably because the voters showed maturity in preferring to vote on nationalist issues rather than fall prey to political patronage. Indira Gandhi was now well on her way to dominating the political scene for a long time to come. India's victory over Pakistan in December 1971 and the subsequent creation of independent Bangladesh out of the erstwhile East Pakistan in the Liberation War was a big boost to the image of Indira Gandhi in the state assembly elections in March 1972. The Congress came to power in many states. The elections of 1971 and 1972 had virtually reduced the importance of the Congress and the Swatantra Party as significant opponents. Problems. The huge enthusiasm for Indira Gandhi, however, started fading by 1973 in spite of some important achievements of the government. Economic problems grew. The main issue was high inflation that followed from the wartime expenses, drought in some parts of the country, and the oil crisis of 1973. Food grains production declined due to poor monsoons and low agricultural growth had its adverse impact on industry as well as world crude prices showed India was affected by the high costs of import and the resulting high prices of petroleum products. Unemployment grew. There were strikes, the most notable one being the All India Railway strike in May 1974. Most of the influential social classes got gradually eliminated from Indira Gandhi. The rich peasants resented land reforms. The industrialists resented the wide-scale internationalization and socialist policies, and the middle classes were deeply affected by the price rise and were critical of spreading corruption among the official politicians. The fact that Sanjay Gandhi, Indira Gandhi's second son, was entrusted with the venture of producing a small fuel-efficient Indian car and was handed the contract and the exclusive production license, though he had later experience in the field, were seen by most people as nepotism. The JP movement. There were protest movements in many places, especially in Gujarat and Bihar, against the rising prices of essential commodities. The Navnirman movement in Gujarat between December 1973 and March 1974 was serious enough for the central government to decide to dissolve the assembly in the state. The chief minister Chiman Bhai Patel had to resign and the centre promulgated president's rule over Gujarat. The movement in Bihar began as a series of student protests, but it was soon taken up by Jayaprakash Narayan, popularly known as JP, on a larger issue of corruption in high places. JP called for total revolution against the very system that he said had forced people to become corrupt. He demanded that Congress government in Bihar resign and the assembly be dissolved. People were asked to घेराव the legislature and घेराव ordered the legislature and offices and refused to pay taxes. In other words, obstruct government functioning. Jayaprakash Narayan went beyond Bihar to try and draw the rest of the country into the protests with the aim of bringing down Indira Gandhi's government, which was portrayed as corrupt and undemocratic. People in many parts of North India were enthused by JP's call. Besides, the non-left opposition parties rallied behind him. The movement, however, lost momentum by the end of 1974. Indira Gandhi challenged Jayaprakash Narayan to test the strength of his group against the Congress in the 1976 elections, and JP accepted the challenge. However, before the contest could be settled democratically, things changed drastically. The Allahabad High Court decision and the imposition of emergency on June 12, 1975. Justice Sinha of the Allahabad High Court delivered a verdict in an election petition filed by Raj Narayan Indira Gandhi's opponent in the Raebareli contest in 1971, Raj Narayan, had accused Indira Gandhi of corrupt practices during her election campaign. The court verdict declared Indira Gandhi's election to the Lok Sabha in 1971 invalid on the grounds of electoral malpractice, excessive election expenditure, and using government machinery and officials for party purposes. This meant that she could no longer be in the prime minister and could not try for election to parliament for 6 years. An appeal against the judgment was made in the Supreme Court, but before that could be settled, other events took place. For one, in the Gujarat Assembly elections, the Congress party suffered reverses and could not form a government. The JP movement was revived with greater zeal, and the demand grew for Indira Gandhi's resignation. There was a call for nationwide agitation, and an announcement was made that a civil disobedience would begin on June 29. Indira Gandhi responded by recommending to President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed that a state of internal emergency should be declared all over the country because of the lawlessness. The president accordingly declared a state of emergency due to the internal disorder. In accordance with the provisions of Article 352(1) of the Constitution, on June 26, 1975, the Prime Minister's decision had not yet been endorsed by the Cabinet. The Cabinet could agree to it only after the event. Indira Gandhi and JP both to be blamed. Agitation led by JP was getting increasingly chaotic and certainly posed issues of law and order for the government. JP even exhorted the army and the police not to obey illegal orders. When the Allahabad court judgment came, the cry for Indira Gandhi's resignation became strident. Indira Gandhi's appeal to the Supreme Court led to an interim decision by the vocation judge Justice V.R. Krishnan Iyer, who on June 24 allowed a conditional stay of the Allahabad verdict that Indira Gandhi could remain in her post, speak in parliament, but could not vote in it. This stay order reinforced the demand of JP and the Janata Morcha of the removal of Indira Gandhi as the Prime Minister. JP seems to have forgotten the Gandhian principles on which he had been nurtured. She could not have had the patience to wait for the general elections, which were due to in March 1976. If people were dissatisfied, they would have thrown out Indira Gandhi and the Congress, but JP and his allies were not even willing to abide by the Supreme Court judgment and wait for the final decision. In her broadcast to the nation on the evening of June 26, 1975, Indira Gandhi said, "In the name of democracy, it has been sought to negate the very functioning of democracy. Duly elected governments have not been allowed to function. Agitations have surcharged the atmosphere, leading to violent incidents. Certain persons have gone to the length of inciting our armed forces to mutiny and our police to rebel. How can any government worth the name stand by and allow the country's stability to be imperiled?" Indira Gandhi, for her part, seems to have forgotten or deliberately discarded her father's democratic ideas, but then perhaps she was always a little autocratic. She was, after all, instrumental in getting an elected communist government in Kerala dismissed after the Allahabad court judgment. She could have gracefully resigned, dissolved the Lok Sabha, and called for early general elections, or wait a few months on the sidelines for the elections on their due date. But she was not interested in giving up power. She claimed later that resignation would have strengthened the forces that were, according to her thinking, threatening democracy. As Joe Elder, a British sociologist, pointed out, JP erred in launching a mass movement without a cadre of disciplined, non-violent volunteers. His movement's credibility was weakened by the presence within it of extremists of the left and right. On the other hand, the Prime Minister clearly overcorrected in imposing the emergency. PN said, when the fateful movement arrived, JP did not let the law take its own course. Whether it was his mistrust of Indira Gandhi's motives, or his own lack of faith in the democratic method, or his ambition to go down in history as a political messiah of the Indian people, is beside the point. Similarly, Indira Gandhi showed more faith in the repression of political opponents and dissidents in her party than in her own ability to engage them constructively or fight them politically. Whether she opted for the emergency to save herself from loss of power or as shock treatment to bring the country back to sanity is also beside the point. The fact remains that both JP and Indira Gandhi, in between whom the politics of India was then polarized, failed democracy and betrayed their lack of faith in the rule of law. State of emergency 1975 to 1977. The president has proclaimed the emergency. This is nothing to panic about. I am sure you are all aware of the deep and widespread conspiracy which has been brewing ever since I began to introduce certain progressive measures of benefit for the common man and woman in India. Those were in Indira Gandhi's word to the nation in her broadcast to All India Radio. President's rule was soon imposed on Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. The two states were parties other than the Congress ruled the entire country and thus came under direct central rule or were under Congress government's emergency powers were used to replace with compliant men those Congress chief ministers who were strong and could offer opposition to Indira Gandhi. All pending legislative assembly elections were indefinitely postponed. Most opposition leaders Jayaprakash Narayan, Bihari Vajpayee, L.K. Advani, Morarji Desai, Charan Singh, Ashok Mehta, and some Congress dissidents such as Chandrasekhar, as also many journalists, Ajit Bhattacharya, Bhattacharya and Kuldeep Nair, to name two. Trade union leaders, student leaders, and academicians were arrested under the Maintenance of Internal Security Act (MISA). Several organizations of extreme ideologies, the Anand Marg, the RSS, the Jamaat-e-Islami, the CPI-ML were banned. As a result of the emergency, the fundamental rights were suspended and civil liberties were curtailed with the amendments of MISA and the Defence of India Act in July 1975. Parliament was practically ineffective as there were no effective opposition to debate issues. Several decrees, laws, and even constitutional amendments were passed to reduce the power of the judiciary and to declare that Parliament's right to amend the constitution was unlimited. In this context, the 42nd Amendment is memorable. Censorship was imposed on the press, and some newspapers used to come out with blank spaces on the editorial pages to signify that their views had been blacked out for being critical of the situation. The Indian Express and the Statesman will be remembered for trying their best to put across criticism of the emergency and the government. The emergency will be remembered for the ruthlessness of the state. People were detained without charges. The law enforcement authorities abused and even tortured those arrested, and so-called programs for development were thrust on an unprepared people. The rise of Indira Gandhi's younger son Sanjeev Gandhi to wield a power he did not hold officially seemed ominous. He spearheaded the programs of destruction of crowded housing settlements and forced sterilization for controlling the population, causing misery of thousands of people. He was, in the opinion of many, instrumental in helping to set up what was in effect a police state. Support for the emergency. The imposition of emergency was not condemned outright by everyone. In fact, considering that such a mass movement had been curbed and JP arrested, no spontaneous demonstration took place. The JP movement clearly did not have the support of people across the socio-economic spectrum. Middle class, on the whole, initially welcomed the emergency. They were tired of the protest atmosphere and were all in favor of some discipline and the control on the prices. For instance, law and order certainly improved, as did administration. There was a sense of calm that was welcome. MISA was used to arrest smugglers, hoarders, and those indulging in black market. The suppression of strikes also met with general approval. The announcement of the 20-point program enthused the poorer and rural sections of population as well. The economy improved initially, though it was mainly because of the good monsoons, and on the whole, people believed that emergency was a temporary step to bring the country back on the path of progress. Even if the Congress Party President Devkant Barwah's sycophantic praise of Indira Gandhi in 1976 that India was Indira and Indira is India was not shared by all. Many eminent personalities supported her step. At least initially, the Communist Party of India was all in support of the emergency to thwart reactionary forces that is using all the rights and liberties of parliamentary democracy set up in order to destroy the freedom of the country. The party regretted its position later. The Communist Party, Marxists, though opposed it, and some of its members were jailed. Acharya Vinoba Bhave appreciated that it was time for discipline to be imposed. Mother Teresa too supported Indira Gandhi's step for bringing calm and peace in the country. Eminent journalist Kushwant Singh surprisingly supported the emergency in the beginning, as he believed that the JP movement would have led to anarchy in the country. Later on, he was to change his view of the emergency, especially in the light of the atrocities that were perpetrated. Growth of popular discontent. By mid-1976, the popular mood had changed. There was discontent everywhere as the economic improvement could not be sustained. The criminals were back at their work, and the welfare programs failed to at, move at a fast enough pace to please the people. Also, it was the same corrupt and callous bureaucracy and sycophantic and exploitative politicians who were handling these programs, and the impact was therefore poor. The strict and rigid discipline imposed did not meet with the approval of government officials and teachers, who also resented being compelled to fulfill targets of getting people sterilized. The police and bureaucracy had too much power, which they abused of all. The atmosphere of fear and insecurity that had been created made people angry and resentful, but these feelings had no vent, as protest was forbidden, even as there was no alternate way for getting grievances against corrupt and abusive officials redressed. Sanjay Gandhi's rise to power without responsibility created rage, creating unease and anger, not only among intellectuals who feared the erosion of democratic values, but more so among the common people who had to bear the brunt of the demolition and sterilization drives. Surprisingly, the points he put forward were not in themselves bad, for he advocated abolition of dowry, planting of trees, and beautification of cities, encouraging literacy and limiting family size. But the ruthless and insensitive way in which these ideas were implemented caused great misery and shocked people. Abuse of authority, apparently and under the direction of Sanjay Gandhi, were rampant, with no effective press to report with at least some accuracy on the situation, and with people disbelieving the official publicity. News rumors of atrocities and violent protests are put down, forcibly spread, and were believed. The scale of the emergency atrocities were more in the northern parts of the country than in the southern parts. This was to be reflected in the election results of 1977. In retrospect, the emergency was one of the darkest periods of post-independence history of India. The 2-year-long period was also perhaps a very significant episode in the political evolution of the Indian National Congress. A lasting effect of the emergency was to be felt in the way the Congress Party worked since then. At the 1976 AICC session in Guwahati, the stage was set for psychophancy as an important political and need. In fact, psychophancy was institutionalized and prepared the way for state dynastic politics. The Guwahati session marked the debut of Sanjay Gandhi in politics, and the Youth Congress cemented the rise to power by considering Sanjay to be the heir to the throne. So too, on Sanjay's death, Rajiv Gandhi was to step into the space created, even if reluctantly. Elections of 1977, the emergency was extended twice, and then, most unexpectedly, Indira Gandhi called for elections. It is possible that with just sycophants reporting to her about the situation and the absence of a free press to give a correct picture, she thought people would endorse the policies brought in under the emergency rule and thus give them a popular legitimacy. It has also been put forward by some that her inherent democratic instincts were against continuing with the draconian emergency rule. Yet others observed that when she got an idea of the excesses being perpetrated, she wanted to get out of a situation that was getting out of her control. The announcement of the elections came in January 1977. The political prisoners were released and press censorship lifted, even as political parties were allowed to campaign freely. Democracy not sorry Democracy not only throws up the mediocre person, but gives strength to the most vocal, so whosoever they may lack knowledge and understanding. Indira Gandhi opposition gets together in the election. The Congress of Indira Gandhi was opposed by an alliance of opposition parties, the Jan Sangh Congress or Bharatiya Lok Dal led by Charan Singh and the Socialist Party got together to form the Janata Party in February. Jagjeevan Ram, Nandini Satpathy and Hemavati Nandan Bahuguna left the Congress of Indira Gandhi to form their own party, Congress for Democracy (CFD), and CFD Akali Dal DMK and the CPM allied with the Janata Party to fight the elections in opposition to the Congress and its allies, the CPI and AIADMK. After the elections, the CFD merged with the Janata Party. A historic election, the Janata Party alliance made the exercise of the emergency and the issue of civil liberties the major top planks of its election campaign. The people voted in March 1977. The elections seemed to be practically a referendum on the emergency. The Janata Alliance got a huge mandate with 330 out of the 542 seats in the Lok Sabha. The Congress was trounced, especially in the north. Its allies did not perform well either. Both Indira Gandhi and Sanjay Gandhi lost their seats. Incidentally, the Congress did well in the south, where it got most of the 150 odd seats it won. The election results reflected the fact that the south has kept much of the emergency excesses. Furthermore, the pro-poor programs were better implemented there than in the north. Before the elections, many political observers of the India had despaired that democracy had no place in a country in which a majority of the populace was illiterate and presumably unaware of democratic values. They predicted that with the emergency in the India would cease to be a democracy in the true sense. But the elections proved that the Indian people were astute and used their political power to good effect. The poor too understood the value of civil rights. The elections, which brought a non-Congress movement, non-Congress government at the center for the first time since independence, showed that democracy was well embedded in the country. The emergency came to an end on March 21, 1977. Developments in the political system. The elections over time showed how the voters had changed. The 1967 and the 1971 showed a marked increase in electoral malpractices with booth capturing and rigging becoming rampant. The election commission observed that casteism that was becoming prominent, especially in Bihar, vitiates that it vitiates in no mean degree the political atmosphere. This feature had become practically entrenched in the country's voting behavior. Congress in the changes in the Congress in 1971 elections, the fifth general elections since India became independent, came earlier than the due date, thus dissociating the national elections from the elections for the state assemblies. The two had so far taken place simultaneously. After the Trump in these elections, the Congress led by Indira Gandhi adopted the R and adopted the I to become Congress I, and soon after dropped the I as well. The margin of victory for her faction seemed to confirm that it was the real Congress. From now on, the inner party democracy within the Congress was to get more and more eroded. A lasting effect of that emergency was to be felt in the way the Congress party worked since then. At the 1976 AICC session in Guwahati, the stage was set for psychophancy as an important political need. In fact, psychophancy was institutionalized and prepared the way for dynastic politics. The Guwahati session marked the debut of Sanjay Gandhi in politics, and the Youth Congress reinforced the rise to power by considering Sanjay to be the heir to the throne. So, to say on Sanjay's death, Rajiv Gandhi was to step into the space created, even if reluctantly. Growth of regional interests grew and took hold in many parts of the country. At the level of the states, after the 1967 elections, the Congress had lost out in many governments formed by the Samyukta Vidhayak Dal (SVD), composed of the Jana Sangh Socialists and the Swatantra Party. Defectors from the Congress came and went in the North states. The rise of SVD is considered as the manifestation of the growing political consciousness of the lower castes, who had benefited from the land reforms but had not got the political clout. Most of these castes belong to the intermediary position below the Brahmins and of the lowest and form the dominant group in their respective areas. Incidentally, the politics increasingly became affected by the politics of defection in South India. Sorry, In southern India, especially in the Madras state, later Tamil Nadu, a north-south divide was perceived. It was felt that north was trying to dominate and exploit the south. Brahminism was in fact seen as a manifestation of this exploitation, as it was seen to have come from the north. Language became a prominent bone of contention. The south, especially Madras, viewed the possible imposition of Hindi as official language with resentment, while the knowledge of English was more or less evenly spread over the regions of the country. Imposition of Hindi would be very much to the advantage of the people in the Hindi belt in the fields of education and employment. The three language formula calling for learning Hindi, English and the regional language, each one with a different script, was unsatisfactory, as the millions would still have to become proficient in all three, while their northern counterpart would have no extra difficulty with their mother tongue. Kerala, Mysore state, later Karnataka and Andhra adopted the three language formula. Then southern demand that northern states also included southern language in a three language policy for themselves was generally ignored. The northern states either refused to adopt a three language formula, or if it was adopted three, there was no option for taking Sanskrit instead of the southern language, so the formula itself had no meaning. It was in this background that the Dravida parties gained in prominence. Dravida Munetra Kanjhangam DMK formed of the middle class of the region and formally anti-Brahmin in its outlook, gained powers in Madras. It came to power in the state in the 1967 elections with a huge majority and formed the first non-Congress government under CN Annadurai. Since then, the state has in most elections brought to power either the DMK or the All India Anna Dravida Munetra Kanjhangam AIADMK, the group that separated from the DMK under MG Ramachandran. In Kerala, the Congress held CPI and the CPM came together to form the government with EMS Namboodiripad once again becoming the chief minister in West Bengal. After the 1969 election, the Congress lost power and a coalition government was formed by the CPM and the Bangla Congress. Ajoy Mukherjee of the Bangla Congress was the chief minister and Jyoti Basu of the CPM and the home minister. There was trouble in the alliance and the state government also had problems with the center. There was also the conflict with the Naxalites, chiefly the Communist Party. Marxist-Leninists inside the CPML formed in 1969 led by Charu Majumdar, consisting of those rebels who left the CPM saying it had betrayed the revolution. It was in the Naxalbari area that bordered Nepal and Pakistan at the time, East Pakistan, that the rural people had been mobilized around 1967 by Kannu Sanyal of the CPM to demonstrate against landlords who had evicted tenants. The protests soon turned violent, leading to the beheading of some landlords. From the name of the place, the term Naxalites grew to represent those who would resort to violence against the state to protect the interests of the oppressed. Now the CPML also attacked rival communists as agents of the government and the police in urban area. The police took repressive action. They looked to China and Maoism for inspiration. In the end, they were successfully suppressed by the government, though they continued to influence certain areas of the country. In Andhra Pradesh, there was a fresh agitation demanding the creation of Telangana with Hyderabad as its capital. The Naxalites also established themselves in the rural areas. Here in Maharashtra, a new party, Shiv Sena, was founded in 1966 by Bala Saheb Thackeray, more popularly called Bal Thackeray, a cartoonist in Mumbai. This party was vociferous in its demand of Bombay for Maharashtrians and targeted the South Indians residing there, who, according to it, were taking away jobs from the natives. There were even attacks on the homes of South Indians and commercial establishments run by South Indians. The Maharashtra for Maharashtrians approach seemed to find a favor with many of the inhabitants, and the Shiv Sena came second to the Congress in the municipal elections of Bombay. The call for greater autonomy was reflected in the border areas as well. Kashmir had gone through an election in 1967 which was to call to all purposes unfair, with the Congress candidates being elected without opposition as other candidates' nomination papers were rejected. Sheikh Abdullah house arrest for some time, was released. His attitude to the position of Kashmir, why as India remained ambivalent. His attitude to the position of Kashmir, which as which sorry his attitude to the position of Kashmir, sorry his position to sorry his attitude to the position of Kashmir, which India remained his attitude to the position of Kashmir, which India remained ambivalent, but according to some reports, his attitude to the position of Kashmir, which India remained ambivalent, but according to some reports, he was more ready than before with the idea of Kashmir's accession to India. After the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, the new order in South Asia seemed to indicate that India's control over Pakistan was quite firm. Sheikh Abdullah was in a mood for a more conciliatory approach to the center, and Indira Gandhi was ready to open a dialogue with him. He agreed not to raise the issue of self-determination of Kashmir, but to limit his demand to just greater autonomy within the Indian Union. He became the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir and the leader of the National Conference. There was relative peace, and in 1975 Indira Gandhi declared the state of Jammu and Kashmir to be a constitution of India. In 1960, Constituent of India. In 1967, Indira Gandhi accepted the Akali's demand that Punjab be reorganized on linguistic lines. In consequence, the southern part of Punjab, which was prominently Hindi-speaking, became a separate state, Haryana. At the same time, the hilly areas in north-eastern Punjab was merged with the Himachal Pradesh. However, the contentious issue on the status of Chandigarh, which the Akalis wanted to be the capital of Punjab alone, was declared a union territory to be shared by both the states as a capital. Though demonstrations over the status of Chandigarh went on in 1968 and in 1969, and a veteran freedom fighter, Darshan Singh Perumal, fasted unto death. The initially temporary arrangement continued indefinitely. The northeastern regions of India has a strategic importance. The Mijos rose up against the government of India in 1966 with the Mizo National Front (MNF) under the leadership of Lal Denga, demanding sovereign independence of Greater Mizoram. Indira Gandhi had to use the army to quell the rebellion, and the Air Force carried out strikes in as well. The only time the IAF was used in this way in civilian Indian territory. With the 1971 war victory, the Mizo separatist movement slowed down. Negotiating with the Mizo leaders, the Union government offered to turn Mizo Hills into a union territory in July 1971. The Mizo leaders accepted the offer on condition that the status of Union Territory would soon be upgraded to statehood. In January 1972, the Union Territory of Mizoram came into being. Later, under Rajiv Gandhi as Prime Minister, Mizoram was to become a full-fledged state in 1987. There was insurgency in Nagaland too. Nagaland had been a part of Assam at the time of India's independence, but in 1963 it had become a separate state of India. But there were extremists in the state who demanded a separate identity outside the state of India. The radicals in charge of the government were ready to get help and training from China. Violent clashes took place between the Naga rebels and the Indian army. Indira Gandhi handled the situation with firmness, especially during the emergency. In March 1975, President's rule was imposed on the state. The leaders of the largest rebel groups agreed under the Shillong Accord in November 1975 to lay down arms and accept the Indian constitution. However, a small group did not agree, and spurts of violence and conflict continued. Statehood had also in the meanwhile been granted to Meghalaya, Manipur and Tripura in 1972, while the North East Frontier Agency was made into a union territory and renamed Arunachal Pradesh. Annexation of Sikkim had become a protectorate of India in 1950. By 1974, several elections had been held in Sikkim. In the last elections, the two rival parties merged to form the Sikkim Congress and won a massive victory in the polls. This party campaigned for greater political rights. Chogyal, the ruler of Sikkim, tried to suppress the movement but was not successful. He returned to India, and in India we prepared a constitution for Sikkim. The constitution was approved by the National Assembly of Sikkim in 1974. In 1975, a special referendum was held in which an overwhelming majority of the electorate voted in favor of Sikkim's merger with India. As a consequence, Sikkim was incorporated into the Indian Union as its 22nd state in May 1975. After the 36th Amendment of the Indian Constitution, Sikkim is one of the greatest strategic Sikkim is of great strategic importance for India because of its location bordering on China. Language policy to curb the anti-Hindi disturbances. Indira Gandhi assuaged the sentiments of the non-Hindi speaking states by getting the official Languages Act amended in 1967 to provide that the use of English could continue until a resolution to end the use of the language was passed by the legislature of every state that had not adopted Hindi as its official language, and by each house of the Indian Parliament there was a guarantee of de facto use of both Hindi and English as official languages, thus establishing the official government policy of bilingualism in India. The step led to the end of the anti-Hindi protests and riots in some states, centralization of power, and the socialist path. After she came back to power in 1967, Indira Gandhi improved upon what Lal Bahadur Shastri had begun, having a number of advisors to the Prime Minister in the Minister's Secretariat, which came to be known as the Prime Minister's Office when Morarji Desai became Prime Minister. In 1977, the real expansion of the Prime Minister's Secretariat and its emergence as a power centered in its own right occurred under Indira Gandhi, with P.N. Huxar becoming the first principal secretary to a Prime Minister. There was an increase in the number of joint secretaries in the Secretariat as well. Indira Gandhi needed to show her independence by the syndicate within her party. She did not trust the politicians and was not sure when they may conspire to get her removed. She chose to depend on the advice of a team of advisors beside Huxer. There were T.N. Kaul, a career diplomat, P.N. D.P. Dhar, politician turned diplomat, P.N. Dhar, economist turned into bureaucrat, and R.N. Rao, security analyst. Incidentally, the research and analysis wing was established in 1968 on the CIA model with Cow as its head. Huxer, with a firm orientation towards the left, was the principal influence in the socialist path taken by Indira Gandhi. Her other advisors were also enthusiastic about this, as they believed in socialist ideals. They felt that the state needed to have a greater role in the economy for social equity to be ensured and national integration to be nurtured and advanced. They were in favor of the public sector too for promoting social integration. It is not certain that Indira Gandhi held these ideals, but she was pragmatic in her awareness that it was what she needed to follow. Her advisors helped develop her image as a socialist in economics, a secularist in religious matters, and as one who was pro-poor and wanted development for all, says Ramchandra Guha, clipping the wings of the judiciary. The judiciary came in the way of implementing many of the steps to facilitate facilitate quick social reforms. The contention over property as a fundamental right was severed. The court had obstructed the implementation of the abolition of privy purses as well as the nationalization of banks, which was almost immediately implemented through a presidential ordinance. In 1971, the 24th Constitutional Amendment Act was put in place that authorized Parliament to amend many provisions of the Constitution. This was to overcome the restrictions placed by the Supreme Court on Parliament regarding amendment of fundamental rights. Golaknath case in 1972 came the 25th Constitutional Amendment Act, providing that giving effect to certain directive principles could not be challenged in the court on the grounds of their being inconsistent with certain fundamental rights. In 1973, the practice of appointing the senior most Supreme Court judge as the Chief Justice of India was set aside, and Justice A.N. Ray was made Chief Justice of India, though there were three other judges senior to him. The appointment was politically motivated as A&A was seen to be on the government's side when the law passed by the parliament, giving it greater powers to amend the constitution, had been challenged in the apex court. Justice Ray had voted in favor of the government's view. This was seen as having influenced his promotion. Then in 1975 came the 38th Amendment Act, specifying that the satisfaction of the president or the governor to declare emergency or issue ordinances could not be challenged in the court. The 39th Amendment Act of 1975 provided that the disputes regarding the election of the President, Vice President, Speaker and Prime Minister could not be heard by the High Courts or Supreme Court, but only by a special court to be set up by the Parliament. The 42nd Amendment was to further curtail the power of the judiciary. The 42nd Amendment Act, a mini constitution of sorts. In 1976 came the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act that was the longest one till then and brought about sweeping changes in the constitution, so much so that it came to be called a mini constitution in itself. It added some 40 articles and a new chapter to the constitution. Besides adding new words to the preamble, the main ideas were to exclude the courts entirely from election disputes, to concentrate power in the central government as against the states, so that the country could be ruled as a unitary and not a federal policy, to protect revolutionary social legislation from judicial scrutiny, and to further curb the power of the judiciary so that it would be difficult for the court to upset parliament's policy regarding certain matters. Some of the huge changes this amendment brought about that affected the democratic system are given below. Some of these steps would be repealed by the Janta government that came in 1977. The 42nd Amendment placed amendments outside the purview of the courts, further declaring that there was to be no limitation on the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution. It curtailed the power of the High Courts and the Supreme Court in matters of judicial review and its jurisdiction. In the preamble, India was now characterized as a sovereign socialist, secular democratic republic instead of original sovereign democratic republic. Besides, the words unity of the nation was changed to unity and integrity of the nation. New directive principles were added to the constitution, and the directive principles were on the whole accorded primacy over the fundamental rights. A new chapter on the fundamental duties were added to the constitution. The term of the Lok Sabha was extended from 5 years to 6 years. It further froze the number of seats in constituencies for election to Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies at the 1971 census level. Till the first census after 2000, there was to be no re, re, readjustment every 10 years after every census, as was the practice till then. The laws made by Parliament to deal with anti-national activities were declared to take precedence over fundamental rights. The necessity of quorum in Parliament as well as in state legislatures were discarded. As per its provisions, the proclamation of national emergency could be made for a part of territory of India. The duration of president's rule without Parliament's approval was extended from 6 months to 1 year. The centre was given the power to deploy armed forces in a state if a serious situation of law and order occurs. Socio-economic policies. It was P.N. Aksar who apparently advised Indira Gandhi that if she wanted to get control of her party, she must oppose the syndicate on ideological lines. So she presented the socialist path to be adopted for the good of the country. Several steps were taken in keeping with this socialistic ideology. Nationalization of banks and other sectors of economy. Bank nationalization was a step on this path, as Indira Gandhi sided with the Young Turks. One of those leaders was Chandrasekhar. She relieved Morarji Desai of his finance portfolio as he opposed the idea, pointing out that the step would cause a strain on the government administration and lead to lower resources for economic development. Even as it increased the bureaucratic control, Indira Gandhi then adopted the ordinance way to nationalize 14 major private banks in July 1969. The ordinance was later passed by Parliament to become Banking companies Acquisition and Transfer of Undertakings Act in 1980. When Indira Gandhi came back to power, another 6 banks were nationalized. The Prime Minister explained over the radio that Indira might be an ancient country The prime minister explained over the radio that India might be an ancient country but was a young democracy and as such should remain vigilant against the domination of the few over the social, economic and political systems. Banks, she said, should be publicly owned so that they catered to not just large industries and big business but also to agriculturists, small industries and entrepreneurs. Furthermore, the private banks had been functioning erratically erratically with the hundreds of them failing and causing loss to the depositors who were given no guarantee against such loss. The nationalization did not result in a huge expansion of the banking sector, with branches not only increasing in numbers but also coming up in remote and rural areas where in the former credit system was hitherto under unknown. Household savings increased with deposits increasing, investments rose in the informal sector. The nationalization of banks then led to credit being provided to agriculture and small and medium industries. It was stipulated that banks had to reserve a certain percentage of credit to the priority sectors, agriculture and small and medium industries. Differential interest rates scheme introduced in 1972 required the public sector banks to provide at lower than normal rates of interest to the weaker sections of the society. After being re-elected in 1971 on a campaign that endorsed nationalization, Indira Gandhi went on to nationalize the coal, steel, copper, refining, cotton, textiles and insurance industry. The main reasons were to protect employment and in the interests of the organized labor. How whatever industries remained in private hands were strictly regulated. The foreign-owned private oil companies in the India created obstructions for India by refusing to supply fuel to the Indian forces during the war of 1971. In consequence, Indira Gandhi nationalized the oil companies in 1973. Since then, the major oil companies have to maintain a minimum stock of oil for military use when needed. Evolution of princely privileges. After India got independence, the rulers of princely states on merging with the state of India, thus losing the right to rule, were granted a privy purse by the government of India. This purse was a certain amount of money payable annually to the rulers and their successors of such states in proportion to their revenue, ranking as a salute state under the British Raj. The antiquity of the dynasty, etc. Article 291 of the Constitution of India. The privy purse would be a fixed tax-free amount guaranteed to the former princely rulers and their successors. The quantum of these purses ranged from Rs 5,000 per annum to Rs 26 lakhs per annum. The privileges enjoyed by the erstwhile rulers were often questioned and considered by many to be a real relic of the past. In 1969, attempt by the Indira Gandhi government to abolish the Privy Purse system and the official recognition of the titles did not meet with the success. The constitutional amendment bill to this effect was passed in the Lok Sabha, but it failed to get the required thirds majority in the Rajya Sabha. It was only in 1971 that with the passage of the 26th amendment to the Constitution of India that the Privy Purses were abolished. As per the objectives and reason stated in the amendment bill, the concept of rulership with privy purses and special privileges unrelated to any current functions and social purposes was incompatible with the egalitarian social order. The government therefore decided to terminate the privy purses and privileges of the rulers of former Indian states. It was necessary for this purpose, apart from amending the relevant provisions of the Constitution to insert a new article therein so as to terminate expressly the recognition already granted to such rulers and to abolish privy purses and extinguish all rights, liabilities and obligations in respect of privy purses. Thus Article 363A was inserted in the Constitution. Besides, the abolition of the privy purses would reduce the government's revenue deficit. MRTP Act in 1969, the Indira Gandhi government was able to get the monopolies and restrictive trade practices. MRTP Act passed after abolishing the managing agents system. The latter, it was thought, enabled a small number of capitalists to control a large number of industrial enterprises, even though they had little or no financial stake in them. The MRTP commissioner was to check the concentration of economic power wielded by a few leading business families. Steps for equity and poverty reduction. It was under Indira Gandhi's administration that he closed calling for equal pay for equal work for both men and women was enshrined in the Indian Constitution. It was also in the cause of social equity that the privileges were withdrawn. Her program for poverty reduction and redistribution of wealth included rapid enforcement of land ceilings, agricultural as well as urban land ownership legislation for redistribution of land to the marginal farmers was also passed in many states. Even at the late Prime Minister's critics would concede that the maximum number of legislations of social significance was brought about during her tenure. Pankaj Bohra: I suppose you could call me a socialist, but you have to understand what we mean by that term. We used the word socialism because it came closest to what we wanted to do here, which is to eradicate poverty. You can call it socialism, if by using that word we arouse controversy, I don't see why we should use it. I don't believe in words at all. Indira Gandhi: a program was initiated for distribution of food grains at low cost to the economically vulnerable sections of population. A program was in sorry a program was initiated for distribution of food grains at low cost to the economically vulnerable sections of population. A crash program program for creation of employment in rural areas was also devised. Programs for building houses for landless laborers were designed. At least on paper, bonded labor was abolished and there was a moratorium on the debts of the poor. As already mentioned, the nationalized banks had to keep in mind priority sector lending. The nature of the reforms has been criticized, but it cannot be denied that the social changes had the long-term effect of bringing to prominence middle-ranking farmers from the lower castes, and these classes were to pose a challenge in the political system in the north, tackling economic reform problems. In the mid-60s, Indian economy was going through a crisis. There were shortage of food grains, a huge fiscal deficit, and a deterioration in balance of payments situation. This led to a greater dependence on foreign aid. The war with Pakistan in 1965 resulted in the suspension of food aid from the US, which refused to remove the PL-480 agreement. In the circumstances, 5-year planning was suspended in favor of annual plans between 1966 and 1969. Inflation remained high, except during the emergency. Unemployment too was a grave problem. Devaluation of the rupee. There was pressure from the US, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund on India to reduce its control over trade and industry and to devalue the rupee. Indira Gandhi did devalue the rupee in June 1966 by 36.5%, increasing the dollar's value against it by 57.4%, according to BL Nehru's account. In Nice Guys finished second. Lal Bahadur Shastri had decided upon devaluation as early as January 1966 before he went to Tashkent. The idea behind the step was that devaluation would help India sell more abroad and get the dollars to pay for its imports of foods, oils, or foods, sorry, food, oil, and capital goods. The step was severely criticized. The critics seemed to be vindicated when the World Bank fell short on its commitment to quickly organize more aid. Foreign capital did not come as expected. Indira Gandhi felt betrayed and lost faith in promises made by the West. This could have been a factor in her subsequent shift leftward. Furthermore, another drought added to macroeconomic difficulties, and the effect of devaluation was ineffective due to the contradictory export-import policies. Devaluation thus came to be seen as a failure. The medium-term effect of devaluation was in fact beneficial. India managed to avert famine as well as bankruptcy, and the trade deficit reduced drastically by 1978 to 1971. In the short term, however, it led to inflation and failed to to the extent that it was not accompanied by other reforms. In the circumstances, the idea of liberalizing the economy became politically unacceptable and was abandoned. Indira Gandhi chose to control the deficit through drastically cutting down government expenditure. This led to an industrial slowdown. Indira Gandhi had by now turned leftwards and launched some radical policies, nationalizing banks and insurance, enacting the MRTP Act, enacting the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act (FERA), and which placed restrictions on foreign investment and foreign companies functioning in India, taking over Sikh companies, especially in the textile sector, rather than letting them close down. In the long term, some of these steps weakened the Indian economy, causing stagnation and slow growth. But in the short term, they led to an improvement in the economic situation so much so that India was able to stay clear of a debt crisis. Foreign exchange was painstakingly built up. The, the resolve was to provide food aid. It seemed sensible to use the foreign exchange to buy food grains commercially, as was done after the poor harvests in 1972. Of course, the success of the Green Revolution helped to restore the food economy. Fourth Five-Year Plan. The much postponed Fourth Five-Year Plan 1969 to 1974 was at last launched. Its investment outlay was almost double that of the third plan. The goal to was stated to be growth with stability and progressive achievement of self-reliance. The plan was dovetailed to the socialist principles adopted by Indira Gandhi. By then, the Rationale was the 10-point program put forward by Indira Gandhi in 1967, her first economic policy formulation soon after taking office of Prime Minister. The program placed an emphasis on greater state control of the economy, as it was believed that government control ensured greater welfare than leaving the economy to the private sector. So the private sector needed to be regulated. By the end of the 1960s, the liberalization process had been reversed. India's policies could be called as protectionist. The government intended that India should be free of dependence on foreign aid and emphasized on increasing agricultural and industrial production. Of the objectives of the fourth plan included increasing the income of the rural population and augmenting the supply of food, making efforts towards maximizing production, attaining stability of prices, making policies to encourage mixed economy, bringing about human resource development, especially in rural areas. It was intended to provide for the minimum needs of the community through a rural works program. The performance of the plan was not as good as expected, though many of the social goals were realized. The shortfall in targets was mainly because the war with Pakistan and dealing with the refugees from East Pakistan took their toll, and because of the 1973 oil crisis. Green Revolution success. The bright spot on the economics scene was the success of the new agricultural strategy, the Green Revolution, the seeds of which had been sown in Lal Bahadur Shastri's tenure, bore fruit and benefited the government of Indira Gandhi. The new dwarf varieties of wheat that the Punjab and Haryana farmers adopted led to bumper harvests. The new varieties of rice, groundnut, and cotton too did well. The production of wheat especially grew sensationally. There were shortcomings in the strategy. Huge regional varieties, large areas unaffected by the revolution, still depending on the erratic monsoons, growth in the disparity of farmers' income, and what was to be seen much later, the damage to the environment, overuse of chemical fertilizers and wastage of water. But at the time, the feeling was that endemic food shortage had ended. Fifth Five-Year Plan. The Fifth Five-Year Plan 1974 to 1979 did not last its full term, but its programs most coincided with the emergency period. The plan was targeted at reducing poverty through reducing the consumption needs of the poor and by enacting a range of socio-economic reforms. This was more or less an aspect of the 20-point program. With the emergency in place, the economic programs could be implemented or forcefully needed, with the economy growing at the rate of 9% in 1975 to 1976 alone. Plan was the fifth plan was the first plan during which the which the per capita income grew by over 5%. However, with the elections of 1977 and the Janata government coming to power, the fifth plan period was curtailed and it was ended in 1978. The Indo-Pak War of 1971 and the birth of Bangladesh. The war between India and Pakistan in 1971 was a milestone in that it saw the liberation of East Pakistan resulting in the birth of a new nation, Bangladesh. In the 1970 polls in Pakistan and unrest in East Pakistan in 1970, General Yahya Khan, who had succeeded Ayub Khan as president and chief marshal, sorry, 1970, General Yahya Khan, who had succeeded Ayub Khan as president and chief martial law administrator, sorry, the 1970 polls in Pakistan and unrest in East Pakistan in 1970, General Yahya Khan, who had succeeded Ayub Khan as president and chief martial law administrator in Pakistan, promised to restore democracy in Pakistan and duly called for general elections, the first ever election based on adult franchise in that country. Also, the number of seats to the National Assembly was to be in proportion to the population. East Pakistan, the more populous of the two wings of the Pakistan, was thus naturally allotted more seats than West Pakistan. In West Pakistan, the dominant party was the Pakistan People's Party (PPP) led by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, while in East Pakistan, the Awami League led by Mujibur Rahman was the dominant party. Mujibur Rahman spoke of the Eastern wing being repressed by the military rulers and treated as a colony to cater to the West Pakistan's interests. The East Pakistanis resented their language Bengali being sidelined and the low representation of their people in the higher administrative sections of the country. Mujibur Rahman demanded greater autonomy and a true federal constitution with greater powers for the East wing. The poll was held in December 1970 and the results showed where Pakistan was heading. While the PPP won a majority of seats in West Pakistan, the Awami League simply swept the elections in East Pakistan and in the process got a majority overall. Yahya Khan did not like the prospect of an assembly led by an East Pakistani and dominated by East Pakistanis with their demand for autonomy in framing a new democratic constitution. There was also fear among the West Pakistan rulers that the Hindus in East Pakistan, many of whom were well-educated professionals, might influence the writing of constitution. Yahya Khan, with the endorsement of Zulfikar Bhutto, postponed convening the National Assembly. This angered the East Pakistanis and the call for a general strike by the Awami League met with a good response. In March 1971, the Pakistani military regime took steps to crush the protest and sent tanks and forces into East Pakistan. Mujibur Rahman was arrested and moved to an unknown destination. There seemed little chance for reconciliation after the violent clashes and the brutal killing of civilians, especially students, by the Pakistani army. Refugee influx in India and Indian response. One consequence of the civil war in East Pakistan was the exodus of refugees, mostly Hindus, from that country into India. The numbers running into millions by August 1971. India allowed these refugees in and set up camps for them in West Bengal, in Tripura and Meghalaya, and even in Madhya Pradesh and Orissa, and fed them. It was the central government that bore the cost of all this in the beginning. In the beginning, India mounted diplomatic efforts at the convincing the world powers of the desperate situation building up. Indira Gandhi contacted the US on the matter. Henry Kissinger, the national security advisor to the US president at the time, brought a letter from the US president asking India to send back the refugees under UN supervision. Indira Gandhi pointed out that the American arms given to Pakistani, which were once used against India in 1965, were now being used by Pakistan against its own people. It's against its own people. She also asked if the refugees from Hitler's Germany would have been repatriated under the conditions that existed at the time. It is now known that Kissinger and Nixon differed in their opinions on the situation. Nixon favored Pakistan, especially as it had secretly helped Kissinger establish contact on behalf of the US with China and did not want to help India. The USSR, as opposed to the US, agreed with India on the situation on the subcontinent that the two wings of wings of Pakistan had drifted to apart for a possible reconciliation. The USSR offered military equipment to India. It also proposed a friendship treaty with India, which would act as a deterrent to Pakistan and China if they thought of getting together and indulging in military adventurism. When India's foreign minister at the time, Swarn Singh, visited Moscow in June 1971 and met his Soviet counterpart and Andriy Gromyko and the president Kosygin Kosygin Alexei Kosygin Alexei Kosygin Alexei Alexei Kosygin Alexei Kosygin. It was decided that such a friendship treaty would be signed. In August 1971, the foreign ministers of the two countries signed the Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation. The most significant part of the treaty spoke of mutual consultations on suitable measures to be taken in the face of any attack or threat of an attack on either country, so as to remove the threat and ensure peace and security of their countries. By the summer of 1971, India had decided to intervene actively in the situation. Indian forces began to provide instruction in the use of weapons to Bengali guerrillas in training camps. The group of these fighters, comprising regular soldiers of the erstwhile United Pakistan as well as fresh volunteers, was known as Mukti Bahini. These guerrillas were to sneak across the border into East Pakistan to attack in army camps and communication installations. The Mukti Bahini was to play an important role in the liberation of East Pakistan. Indira Gandhi taught the world to acquaint the leaders of the situation on the subcontinent, the country that could have made a difference, namely the US, and remained unimpressed. In November 1971, Richard Nixon and Indira Gandhi met but did not agree on the situation. Nixon said that the US would not agree to overthrow Yahya Khan and warned India against taking military action in the meanwhile. The situation along the border between India and East Pakistan had reached conflict stage with shelling across the line taking place. It was an opportunity for the members of the Mukti Bahini to use the exchange of fire to cross the border to carry out their insurgent activity, war and liberation of East Pakistan. Pakistan chose to attack India on the western border on December 3, 1971, as their bombers targeted airfields along the western borders. Their artillery regiments attacked Kashmir under under in, India under the generalship of Sam Manekshaw took swift action in Kashmir and Punjab on the ground, and with massive air strikes, the Indian Navy got into action for the first time and moved towards Karachi. The Western Naval Command under Vice Admiral S.N. Kohli successfully launched a surprise attack on Karachi to port under the codename Trident. India now had every reason to push across into eastern Pakistan with its troops and tanks and to turn the secret skirmishes into open confrontation. It must be pointed out here that India had modernized its armed forces besides starting the indigenous weapons in manufacture. The Pakistani military was no match for the Indian forces. There was a further handicap that the Pakistanis were working under the low morale of its forces due to the civil unrest and defection of Bengali personnel and the stress of having to fight people of their own country. It had been pointed out that Yahya Khan's strategy was difficult to understand. If Chinese help was anticipated, it did not come. Perhaps the snow in the Himalayas in December did not allow any Chinese action. The Indian forces, on the other hand, had no problem with weather on the eastern front and furthermore were helped by the locals and the Mukti Bahini moving towards Dhaka, now Dhaka from core directions. The Indian forces captured strategic installations. The Indian Eastern Naval sorry The Indian Eastern Naval Command under Vice Admiral Neelakanta Krishnan created a naval blockade in the Bay of Bengal and isolated East Pakistan from East Pakistan from December 4 onwards. The aircraft carrier INS Vikrant was deployed to carry out attacks on the major ports of East Pakistan. India's intention for East Pakistan became clear on December 6, 1971, when the Indian government formally recognized the Provisional Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. The US sent Task Force 74 led by the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise I into the Bay of Bengal, but it was just a show of power and an indication of the US. It did not affect the course of what happened to East Pakistan. It was now clear that Dhaka was going to fall to the Indian forces, and what is more, once the East Pakistan issue was settled, India might turn its full attention to the West Pakistan and also cause its disintegration. On December 13, the Yahya Khan sent a message to Lieutenant General A.K. Niazi, the commander of the Pakistan Eastern Command, to give up arms, but it was December 16, 1971 before the instrument of surrender of Pakistan Eastern Command, stationed in East Pakistan, was signed between the Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, the GOC in C of Indian Eastern Command, and Lieutenant General A.K. Niazi, the commander of the Pakistan Eastern Command at the Ramna Race Course in Dhaka. East Pakistan had been liberated and a new independent nation Bangladesh had come into being. Mujibur Rahman, released from captivity, assumed the leadership of the new nation. On December 16, Indira Gandhi announced on radio a unilateral ceasefire on the Western Front as well. The next day, Pakistan too announced a ceasefire. Indira Gandhi's image was greatly enhanced as an effort of the victory. Many in India called her Durga. There was a new confidence and a sense of power and achievement in the Indians. The country seemed to have established a dominant position in the subcontinent. The similar agreement in Pakistan following the war, Yahya Khan resigned and Zulfikar Bhutto took over. Bhutto was reported to be in favor of beginning a new relationship with India. India was not against the idea. Bhutto was invited for a summit at Simla in June 1972. At the meeting, the Indians expressed the need for a comprehensive treaty settling all outstanding problems, including Kashmir, but the Pakistanis preferred a step-by-step approach in the end, whereas the Indian side wanted a non-war pact. It had to agree to a renunciation of force by both sides. The Kashmir issue was left hanging, and regarding the line of control which India wanted to be respected by both sides. Pakistan added the caveat without prejudice to the recognized position of either side. Many of India's demands were watered down, and India apparently went with it because it realized the precarious position held by Bhutto in Pakistan, and pushing too hard may have deposed him and made the situation worse. The agreement, not treaty as India wanted, was signed on July 2. Text of the Simla Agreement: The Government of India and the Government of Pakistan are resolved that the two countries put an end to the conflict and confrontation that have hitherto marred their relations, and work for the promotion of a friendly, harmonious relationship and the establishment of a durable peace in the subcontinent, so that both countries may henceforth devote their resources and energies to the pressing task of advancing the welfare of their people. In order to achieve this objective, the Government of India and the Government of Pakistan have agreed as follows: that the principles and the purposes of the Charter of the United Nations shall govern the relations between the two countries, that the two countries are resolved to settle their differences by peaceful means through bilateral negotiations or by any other peaceful means mutually agreed upon between them, pending the final settlement of any of the problems between the two countries. Neither side shall unilaterally alter the situation, and both shall prevent the organization, resistance, and encouragement of any acts detrimental to the maintenance of peaceful and harmonious relations. That the prerequisite for reconciliation would never, neverly, neverly and durable peace between them is a commitment uh, by both the countries to peaceful coexistence, respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, and non-interference in each other's internal affairs on the basis of equity and mutual benefit. That the basic sources and causes of conflict which have bedevilled the relations between the two countries for the last 25 years shall be resolved by peaceful means, that they shall always respect each other's national unity, territorial integrity, political independence, and sovereign equality. That in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations, they will refrain from the threat of use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of each other. Both governments will take all steps within their power to prevent hostile propaganda directed against each other. Both countries will encourage the dissemination of such information as would promote the development of friendly relations between them, in order progressively to restore and normalize relations between the two countries. Steps by step, it was agreed that steps shall be taken to resume communications, postal, telegraphic, sea and land, including border posts and air links, including all flights. Appropriate steps shall be taken to promote travel facilities for the nationals of the other country. Trade or cooperation in economic and other agreed fields will be resumed as far as possible. Exchange in the fields of science and culture will be promoted. In this connection, delegations from both the countries will meet from time to time to work out the necessary details in order to initiate the process of the establishment of durable peace. Both the governments agreed that Indian and Pakistani forces shall be withdrawn to their side of the international border. In Jammu and Kashmir, the line of control resulting from the ceasefire of December 17, 1971 shall be respected by both sides without prejudice to the recognized position of either side. Neither side shall seek to alter it unilaterally, irrespective of mutual differences and legal interpretations. Both sides further undertake to refrain from the threat or the use of force in violation of this line. The withdrawals shall commence upon entry into force of this agreement and shall be completed within a period of 30 days thereof. The agreement shall be subjected sorry The agreement will be subjected to ratification by both countries in accordance with their respective constitutional procedures and will come into force with effect from the date on which the instruments of ratification are exchanged. Both governments agreed that their respective heads will meet again at a mutually convenient time in the future, and that in the meanwhile the representatives of the two sides will meet to discuss further the modalities and arrangements for the establishment of durable peace and normalization of relations, including the questions of repatriation of prisoners of war and civilian internees. A final statement of Jammu and Kashmir and the resumption of diplomatic relations. Source: Ministry of External Affairs website. The Simla Agreement was considered to be a comprehensive blueprint for good neighborly relations between India and Pakistan. Under the agreement, both countries undertook to abjure conflict and confrontation and to work towards the establishment of durable peace, friendship, and cooperation. The two countries agreed to follow a set of guiding principles in managing relations with each other: respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, respect for each other's unity, political independence, sovereign equality, and abjuring hostile propaganda. There was a mutual commitment to the peaceful resolution of all issues through direct bilateral approaches and to build the foundations of a cooperative relationship with special focus on people-to-people contacts. However, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's speech in Pakistan's National Assembly soon after the agreement indicated that the Kashmir issue was very much alive and that Pakistan was ready to help the people of Kashmir if they started a freedom movement in 1976 in spite of the Pokhran nuclear test by India and the hostile reception to it in Pakistan. The two countries agreed to reopen diplomatic establishments and normalize relations, foreign policy and relations with other countries. Bangladesh, India's relations with Bangladesh were especially cordial with Mujibur Rahman in power. However, Mujibur Rahman's policies that were pro-India India did not meet with approval of many in the political and military circles of Bangladesh, as they feared Bangladesh would become some kind of satellite state to India. Mujibur Rahman was assassinated in 1975, following which came Islamist and military regimes. Indira Gandhi's relations with these regimes was uncomfortable, but on the whole, the relations between the two countries remained amicable. Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka. Indira Gandhi has had cordial relations with her Sri Lankan counterpart Sri Mavo Bandaranaike and was initially accommodative about the ethnic problem involving the Tamils in that island country. In 1974, India ceded the tiny islet of Kachhattivu to Sri Lanka in order to save Bandaranaike's socialist government from a political disaster. In 1974, India ceded the small islet Kachhathivu to Sri Lanka through the Indo-Sri Lankan Maritime Agreement that was intended to settle the maritime boundary in the Park Palk Strait. Sri Mavo's popularity was rather low at the time, and Indira Gandhi decided to cede the island so as to improve the image of the Sri Lankan Prime Minister and to help stabilize the Bandaranaike regime in Sri Lanka. The agreement, which did not specify fishing rights, allowed Indian fishermen to fish around Kachhathivu and to dry their nets on the island. However, in 1976, without consulting the Tamil Nadu Assembly or Parliament, Indira Gandhi's government finalized another agreement to determine the boundary in the Gulf of Mannar and Bay of Bengal and restricted both the countries' fishermen from fishing in the other waters. The fishing vessels and fishermen of India shall not engage in fishing in the historic waters, the territorial sea and the exclusive economic zone of Sri Lanka, nor shall be fishing vessels and fishermen of Sri Lanka engage in fishing in the historic waters, the territorial sea and the exclusive economic zone of India without the express permission of Sri Lanka or India, as the case may be, said the agreement. Soviet Union under Indira Gandhi, India's relations with the Soviet Union depend, depended, depend depend especially in the light of attitudes of the US and China regarding Pakistan. The Treaty of Friendship with the US was moved to counter the Chinese closeness with Pakistan when the US introduced a resolution in the UN Security Council calling for a ceasefire and the withdrawal of armed forces by India and Pakistan after Pakistan began the attack on the Western Front. The Soviet Union vetoed the resolution, though the Soviet Union was not happy with India's nuclear test of 1974. It did not support further action against India. Certainly, there was a tilt towards the Soviet Union for pragmatic reasons during the times of Indira Gandhi. United States from United States from the time Indira Gandhi came to power. The relations with the US were strained when Lyndon Johnson was president and India was reliant on the US for food aid. Indira Gandhi resented it with strings attached that in turn for food. India was expected to agree to the policies of the US. She was also firm about not signing the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons (NPT) after Nixon came to power in the US. Relations deteriorated. Nixon disliked Indira Gandhi as well as Indians and had a clear bias for Pakistan. Indira Gandhi expressed her criticism of the Vietnam War as well West Asia. Indira Gandhi fully supported the Palestinian cause and against Israel. The pro-Arab stand had mixed results, especially after the war with Pakistan, while some of the Arab governments remained neutral Egypt, Algeria, Syria. For instance, the conservative American Arab monarchies in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and United Arab Emirates supported Pakistan. Libya saw the Indian intervention in East Pakistan as an attack on Islam. Ties with Iran floundered for a while in the wake of the Indo-Pak War, while with Iran viewing India's tilt towards Moscow and the break-up of Pakistan as a part of a larger conspiracy against Iran involving India, Iraq, and the Soviet Union. However, India had not agreed to activate the Baghdad Pact and draw in the Central Treaty Organization (CENTO) into the conflict at Pakistan's instigation. By 1974, the relations had recovered enough for Iran and India to come to an agreement that led to Iran supplying a substantial amount of crude oil to India. Asia Pacific in 1967, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN) was formed. In India's view, ASEAN was a pro-US organization with links to the Seattle. The ASEAN countries were not happy about India's stance over Vietnam and close ties with Moscow, nor did India's nuclear test meet with their approval. They saw it as a contributing to the tension in the region. Africa, India's image as a vigorous opponent of colonialism suffered in African eyes because of the cordial relations India maintained with the Commonwealth of Nations. Initially, India condemned the armed struggle in Kenya and Algeria for independence. Under Indira Gandhi, relations began to be repaired. Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, and Libya, the countries that had supported India during the Indian War in 1962, got special attention after she came to power. Diplomatic and economic relations with these states were expanded. Unlike her father, Indira Gandhi openly supported the liberation struggle in Africa. India's image too had improved in the world with the nuclear test and the refusal to be bullied by the US in the Indo-Pak War of 1971. Furthermore, Indira Gandhi firmly connected the Indian anti-imperialist interests in Africa and those of the Soviet Union. The experience of Indians in Uganda, however, was depressing. They suffered persecution in the Idi Amin regime and were eventually expelled from that nation. The Smiling Buddha, the Smiling Buddha, the Smiling Buddha, the Smiling Buddha, the Smiling Buddha. The Smiling Buddha, though it could be seen as a part of the national security policy, it was scientifically endeavor that led to India's successful detonation. The Smiling Buddha, though it could be seen as a part of the national security policy, it was scientific endeavor that led to India's successful detonation of a nuclear device. Sorry. The Smiling Buddha, though it could be seen as a part of the national security policy, it was a scientific endeavor that led to India's successful detonation of a nuclear device. On May 18, 1974, India conducted its first nuclear test in the Thar Desert of Rajasthan at the army base near the village of Pokhran, officially termed Pokhran, Pokhran First, but code name Pokhran, Pokhran First, but codenamed Smiling Buddha. The exercise Pokhran I sorry Pokhran First, but codename sorry on May 18, 1974, India conducted its first nuclear test in the Thar Desert of Rajasthan at the army base near the village of Pokhran, officially termed Pokhran First, but named Smiling Buddha. The exercise was an underground detonation. It was formerly called a peaceful nuclear explosion. Sorry, on May 18, 1974, India conducted its first nuclear test in the Thar Desert of Rajasthan at the army base near the village of Pokhran, officially termed Pokhran First, but named Smiling Buddha. The exercise was an underground detonation. It was formally called a peaceful nuclear explosion. It was the first time that a confirmed nuclear test was condemned by a nation that was not one of the five permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. It is believed that Indira Gandhi authorized the development of nuclear weapon system, presumably in the In light of China slowly and steadily becoming a nuclear power, she was guided by this belief that it was in the interests of the stability and security of India if it was to develop independently of the nuclear superpowers. The nuclear device, which was of the implosion type, was said to resemble the American nuclear bomb called the Fat Man, was developed under the guidance of Raja Ramana, who was then the director of Bhabha Atomic Research Center (BRC). The project was overseen by the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, Homi Sethna. Some of the other scientists of the renown involved in the projects were P.K. Iyengar, R. Chidambaram, Basanti Nag Chaudhary, and woman Dattatreya Pattovardhan. Though there was euphoria in many sections of the population, there was also a perception that the test was authorized by the Indira Gandhi to avert attention from the unrest that was going on in the country. International reaction: though India called it a test for peaceful purposes, the rest of the world was not too happy about it. The Nuclear Suppliers Group was formed to check nuclear proliferation, as the plutonium used in the test came from the Cirrus reactor supplied by Canada, and the heavy water was supplied by the US. The two countries were unhappy. Canada suspended assistance for the two heavy water reactors then under construction. Pakistan was furious and cancelled the talks that were soon to take place for the normalization of relations. Pakistan's Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto declared that he would not be blackmailed by India and would not accept India's domination in the subcontinent. The Indian text, according to Pakistani opinion, pushed Pakistan into the nuclear field. धन्यवाद. Thank you so much.